extremely glad to be here, and also in the company of such sound people. As I look round the room, I think Austin Mitchell here, who's one of the most clear speakers on the European issue in the Labour Party and has been consistently for a generation. I see David Stoddart, likewise, the House of Lords. We have Christopher Gill, great friend of mine who performed enormous service to us in the House of Commons. John Whittingdale, Margaret Thatcher's private secretary, and now chairman of a very important select committee looking into the whole question of hacking. Mark Reckless, a new member of Parliament. Douglas Carswell, and I can see Mr. Price as well. No, what's your, sorry, Angus McNeill, I beg your pardon, one of the Scots Nats. Yes. But the fact is that we in the United Kingdom are faced with an enormous crisis, but so is Europe. And I just simply want to say what an enormous pleasure it is. I've read part of this book, I haven't completed it yet. It does say at the beginning, the first great Eurosceptic novel the world has been waiting for. I'm sure that's true, but I also just mentioned just one thing, and that is that there was a Eurosceptic novel. It's called The Arkham Memorandum, written by Andrew Roberts, must have been 15, 20 years ago, which I simply put in the same category, if I may. But it's worth reading, because a novel that is always best when it is based on truth, and also when it is illustrative of that truth. And I think, therefore, we're all going to enjoy the book and very much hope that it's a great success. But fundamentally, what you said at the beginning is so true, which is that we are in a mess, but it's an undemocratic mess, and it's caused by the lack of democracy. And those of us who remember Margaret Thatcher's famous words, no, 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 recognize the expression nine, nine, non. So my interest in this is having taken part in the Danish referendum on 2 occasions, in the French referendum, and also in 2 of the Irish referendums, that we as Europeans who are looking to try to make sure that Europe is democratic, that we are in our own country can retain our own democracy, which is so severely under siege, have a right to speak in relation to matters which affect other countries who are also being driven, as you quite rightly say, by this technocratic, undemocratic movement with this authoritarian drive behind it. You are not allowed to say that you want less Europe. You have to say that you want more Europe. That's the message from Brussels, despite the complete collapse of the system. And I don't need to speak about that at all because it's so obvious to everybody that that is what is going on. We're told that 70% of the Icelandic people would say no, and yet the government goes ahead. Interestingly, in relation to Germany, when the treaty went through recently, we were told that 80% of the German people were against it, but 98% of the Bundestag voted for it. You get a similar situation in almost every country, and I'm quite sure that that would be the case here in the United Kingdom as well. We have consistently had no votes or no responses to opinion polls of anything between 65 and 75% to all the major questions relating to the treaties. But we've never been given a referendum, which is why those certainly in this room who have come from this House of Commons have consistently and persistently argued for a referendum. Because this is about the right of the voter. This is not about European states. This is about the right of the voter to be able to make his choice in the ballot box. It's very simple. And the European Union was constructed in the days of Monnet and his associates on the basis that it was essential from their point of view to have a technocratic Europe. And now for the first time in the last 6 months, we've actually witnessed 2 governments being created to technocracies without a general election. This is incredibly dangerous. The internal contradictions and the compression chamber based on this undemocratic, unconsenting arrangement are absolutely fatal. And what is more, and I will conclude on this note because there are others who I believe should have their opportunity. Austin Mitchell, I very much want to hear what he says about this. He knows a huge amount about fishing, more than anybody else except perhaps Kelvin Hopkins, and I suspect that Austin knows more about it than he does. But basically, it's democracy and consent. And one of the things I was asked in an interview with Der Spiegel recently, if I could describe the difference between the fundamental attitudes in Germany and the attitudes in the United Kingdom to the questions which are facing us, this terrible mess. And I said that I think we ought to have a convention of all the leaders of Europe, as well as a referendum, in order to set out clearly the case for the kind of Europe we want, because we have a right to be governed by our own people. We have a right to be governed according to their wishes, and that is the most fundamental right for which people have fought and died. So I'd simply make this point. This book, I believe, is an important opportunity for people to relive in less bureaucratic or technocratic language the realities of what is going on. And I wish the book well, but I also wish the Icelandic people well in their quest for their continuing independence and their continuing right to be able to continue to govern themselves in their own fashion. We have a similar problem here, but then so do all the other countries in Europe. And with youth unemployment running up to over 50% in Spain, all the things that we're witnessing both in Greece, in Spain, in Italy, in France, it doesn't matter where you go, it doesn't work. The project has failed. And the worst of all is the fact that the people who have actually engineered it are keeping it going without any justification whatsoever, and there is no attempt to try to solve the problem in a democratic fashion. That is what they must be condemned for. So my view about it is simply this. We have a duty to stand up for Iceland as we have a duty to stand up for our own constituents. And therefore, it's with great pleasure that I recommend not only this book, but the campaign that is about to start in Iceland. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cass, for your most inspiring speech. And I can tell you that we're flying you home back to Reykjavik next year to give the same address for the Icelandic nation. Austin Mitchell, MP for Grimsby. Grimsby, we all know about in Iceland. It's one of our most loved friendship towns, because we always has looked at us as a Grimsbian. Do we say that?
Better.
We know the quad, we know the sea. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I should say at once that I'm here as a secret agent infiltrator from the Labour Party, so I should go around inspecting party cards at the end of the meeting. But I'm primarily here as the chair of the Anglo-Icelandic Parliamentary Group. The vice chair is Angus, there at the back clutching a bottle of parliamentary beer. But we are the group which handles parliamentary relations with Iceland, and it's a pleasure to be here. A pleasure to be here particularly because it allows me to make yet another apology to Icelanders about the way the government treated Iceland in the financial crisis. We saw the anger when I was last in Iceland and the way anti-terrorist legislation had been invoked to stop financial transactions with Iceland. And believe me, that took a lot of undoing. We had to bring pressure on the Bank of England to send a cashier up to deal with northern banks who were refusing to transfer money to Iceland. I had a phone call from the Icelandic Minister of Fisheries saying that they weren't going to send any more fish, which would have closed Grimsby Market. Fortunately, we were able to get the Bank of England to insist that the banks handle the transactions and the fish began to flow again. But it was a shameful period. As a result of that, we had in the Anglo-Icelandic group a delegation from Iceland that I now have on a petition they signed, the email address of 1/4 of the Icelandic population. So, Hallur, if you want to send literature about the book, I can offer you those those email addresses to send it to. So that's an apology out of the way. The second point is to say that I hope and will campaign for Iceland not to join the European Union. I think it would be disastrous. But just as it says on the back of your book, Europe's future is at stake, and only a fisherman from Iceland can save the continent from a dark dictatorship. I warn you that a fisherman from Grimsby couldn't do it, but you have, because you have the fishermen and the fish, a powerful weapon to use in the argument with Europe and the argument for staying out. It would be a folly to hand your fishing resources over to the common fisheries policy and have them looted by European vessels in the way ours have been. So I think fish are a powerful weapon in your fight, and I wish you joy of it. It would be disastrous for Iceland to join, and I think the way the negotiations have been handled by, getting negotiations going in the hope of familiarising people and allaying fear is a proposal that they've been conned, as we were, into joining, avoided. Only a nation state can conserve and manage its own fish stocks and handle them to be handed on to the next generation of fishermen. And that's what we should have done, that's what you must do. Particularly because so much of that fish comes to Grimsby and we desperately need it, but you need it too. So that's my second point. More power to your elbow in fighting this mounting threat of Icelandic membership. The third point is simply to say that from my perspective, as a Eurosceptic member of the Labour Party who has been opposed to the thing from the start and thinks, unlike most of the Labour Party, it would be better off out, that we're moving to a situation now in which it's possible to envisage not only a referendum on our membership of Europe, but coming out of Europe, because the thing is in such a mess, and the collapse and disintegration of the Euro, which has been a means of building European Union without consulting, without carrying the people, but building it by a common currency union and then common institutions to handle that currency union. This has collapsed on itself and is now producing a situation in which opposition to Europe is growing. We're now approaching a situation, not quite in it yet, in which we have nothing to fear, as Roosevelt said in 1932, but fear itself. And the fear itself is created by the great European fear creation machine. That's the weapon they're using against us. Whatever is proposed that's critical of Europe, they create fear. You must join the Euro, otherwise you'll be out, alone, on your own. Nobody will love you. No transactions will be in the city, in London. The country will go bankrupt. You must, fall in with anything we want. Otherwise, you'll be on your own. Fear again. And now I see in the paper yesterday a letter from a combined chorus of balls. And Mandelson, it was kind of Mandelson balls, the article, as far as I was concerned, that they're saying unless we help to sustain the Euro, and a part of the negotiations to do that, we shall be locked out. Locked out. I mean, what better place to be? When the house is on fire, when the population is in revolt against the decades of austerity that they're going to have to face, and when the Commission and the ministers don't have the foggiest idea what to do, and when the population is revolting, what better place is there to be than locked out? Yeah.